Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. And I want to emphasize we reject coercion and hypocrisy. Those are the two basic governing guidelines of this channel. It would be helpful to keep that in mind. So today is Tuesday, June 30th, 2026, episode 534, and we're going to talk about or review the concept of resetting perspective. Now, it came up after someone left a comment after yesterday's video saying that I define the terms in the way that I do because I don't know what these terms mean. And thanks for proving my point. That's exactly what I'm talking about. When you are going to hold on to a very specific definition, you get to say other people are wrong. Now, what do I mean by that? And that's what I'm going to go into a little bit of a little bit more detail. And this is what I would have to do all the time in class. I would say something, and certainly a lot of people would disagree, but we didn't have enough time in the class to hear what everyone wanted to say. And so I used the discussion board made available through Canvas or Blackboard, whatever program the school was using, where people could just simply upload their thoughts and their comments, their pushbacks, whatever, and everyone got to read it if they wanted to, if they were curious enough to hear my explanation. So this channel also is basically a continuation of what I was doing in the classroom, and I began every class just taking something from the headlines and just throwing it out to the class. Hey, did you guys hear about this? And then try to start the conversation that way. And so to sort of bring into direct relevance what we were doing in the class with what was going on in the world. And I like to think that a lot of the students found that helpful. They were able to connect the dots. And every time I hear a big story on the news, I always wonder, I turn and look at my wife and I say, hey, I wonder if any of my students are sitting there thinking, hey, I've heard of this before. But anyway, so the whole idea of this channel is that everyone who may listen to this is coming from a different position, a different and has a different perspective. So it's multi-perspectival in the sense that I'm not trying to affirm like 10 perspectives. No, it's not that. I'm trying to explain why people see the things they do in the way that they do, and what do you do if you get stuck, right? What do you do if the tools and the perspective you were using is no longer working for you because society has changed, the rules have changed, the world has changed, whatever. So it's not about who's right uh, or who's wrong, but rather is who's being subjective, who is being close-mindedly subjective. And in the process, then we can point out what may be the worst choice or a bad choice in a situation. In other words, a choice which would not help you. And the key markers of bad choices, which you could still do if you wanted, right? That's all about freedom, right? So you can make a really bad choice if you want, but you can't make other people do it, because now we start going into the realm of hypocrisy, coercion, and overall social loss. And that was the point that I was trying to make yesterday with the idea that all socialisms, all of them, share one thing in common. In other words, I racialize them, I categorize them all as being socialistic, which is basically anything that reduces the freedom of the individual in favor of a group. And that's what socialism is, group thinking. And so fascism even goes into that category as well, which fascism is just as another form of socialism. And it's not because I don't know what the words mean. If you look at the characteristics, not what they say they are, but what is actually going on in the system, then yeah, they're all categories, it all fit in the category of socialism. And I even put in Marx as a point of emphasis that he himself had to go to great length, chapter 3 in Communist Manifesto, where he had to distinguish his version of socialism from all the other versions of socialism which existed at the time. And it's a splitting hairs activity. And if you're into that, fine, whatever. I'm not interested. This whole idea of resetting perspective I discussed in episode 7 and episode 403 differently. And I think I have this obsession of not repeating myself. Hey, it's recorded. If anyone has been following the channel, they might say, oh, you talked about this already. I have this weird thing. Maybe it's because of the way that I preach. My father, when he was getting older, he started repeating himself a lot. And so I developed this attitude like, I'll never repeat. But I think, as my wife pointed out to me, most people don't remember what you said a couple of years ago. So they won't even know that you repeated yet. Right. So maybe if I start every episode, I say the same things, then maybe you'll say, oh, he's repeating all the time now. But I'm going to go with the assumption that you have not listened to episode 7 or 403. And so I'm going to represent the idea of resetting perspective. Now, people who push back against this and argue and don't like this framework, they're closed-minded. They're arguing from emotion. They're the kind of people who want to know what's right and what's wrong so they can get on the side of the right and then lord it over everybody else. These are people who are comfortable feeling superior and correct. They're comfortable, right? And so they are at peace because they're better than everybody else. They're smarter than everybody else, this kind of thing. And it's obvious that people who think like that, they come off as arrogant. And I do want to add here as a footnote that people have often called me arrogant. All right. But the thing is, if you listen to me, I don't really assert anything. I don't say things like everyone's got to do it this way. No, all I say is do what you want, but take responsibility for your choices. And in order for this to happen, we have to prioritize freedom. In other words, freedom even to reject what I'm saying. Yeah, that's included in there as well. You know, you don't have to do or act or respond to anything that I say, but it is something that might be good to reference or make a note of. This episode might go a little bit long. Because I'm used to presenting these ideas in a 40-minute, 40 to 50-minute format, but I'm going to try to cut down a lot on the details and just point you in a direction where you might be able to find some more details. Okay, so people who are really comfortable in their box, right? I'm superior, I am right, and so all of you other guys are idiots and you don't know what you're talking about, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that kind of person living in that kind of environment, which allows and enables that kind of thinking, it's a breeding ground for intolerance, right? So uh, once you establish that and people around you are also agreeing with you, so you nail down those beliefs through legislation. And you see this in religious groups, particularly in Islam, Catholicism, even in local Protestant churches, you'll see this. This is the way we do it here. This is the rule. We pass the laws in the session, so everyone has to abide by that. So you're nailed down your subjectivity through rules and regulations. And as soon as you do that, you invite hypocrisy, right? You invite the potential for hypocrisy. Now, this kind of phenomena of rampant hypocrisy is all over the university. You can see it all throughout scholarship. People who have power or have the power of law behind them, they deceive themselves into thinking that they are invincible. They are above morality and society's rules and laws because, hey, they got rules to back them up. Maybe if you were younger and you remember Harry Potter, when I don't know, the Commission of Wizard, whatever it is, they take over Harry Potter's school. Now they get to be invincible. That's where all that arrogance, that's where all that sort of disgusting characteristics, which sort of should repulse us. That's where it comes from. That moral sense of moral superiority because they have the backing of law behind them. So again, they can do anything they want. So, a couple examples today would be this idea of diversity and tolerance. But diversity and tolerance is only real if it happens on their terms, which is the very opposite of diversity and tolerance. So people who are all about diversity and tolerance, they are not diverse or they are artificially diverse, and they are extremely intolerant of people who disagree with their vision of intolerance, right? And the an example of their intolerance would be, oh, there has to be at least one colored person on the panel, there has to be one female on the panel, and they just go through the checklist. And they just simply look for people who satisfy that checklist. So it's an artificial diversity. But what you want are people who are truly diverse. And what you do is you just simply look for the best. Who are the best teachers? Who are the people with the best methodology? And when you do that, you get an organic diversity. Maybe it's not diversity in skin color, but it is very, very likely that you'll have diversity of thought, of philosophy, of religion, whatever. That's how you have an organic, true diversity, and it is extremely tolerant because you want different. And so you are not going to ostracize someone unless they are being excuse me, irrational, coercive, or hypocritical. Those are the ones that you would be intolerant of. And we should, because everyone claims to be in favor of justice, and hypocrisy and coercion grounded in hypocrisy are the very things which are intolerant. So those are two examples. And am I saying this because I don't understand the terms, or, and this is where most people disagree with me, they just don't like the way that I'm describing their favorite term. They don't like the way that I'm using the concept upon which they built their perspective, the way they see themselves, and their place in that perspective as well. So the core problem here is the definition. And I always point this out. And when I point it out to other academicians, other professors, they nod their head. They're like, yeah, yeah. Because that's what a lot of publications do, is that they try to establish a definition. They try to establish the standard by which you know what is acceptable and therefore unacceptable. And so people hold on to definitions like their very lives. That's why some people, especially after an episode like yesterday, will say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about because you don't know what those words mean. Yeah, I'm not using the word that you like to use in the way that you like to use them, but it doesn't mean that I don't know what it means. Because you got to ask yourself, where do these definitions come from? Well, they're made by people who are in subjective positions of power and authority, like scholars, academicians, official knowledge producers, publishers of dictionaries, of encyclopedias. They standardize knowledge. They determine what the definitions are. I talk about this in episode 7 with Renato Rizaldo, Beyond Objectivism. He goes into this and how people have decided what the definition of religion is and how it had to change over time as they met people with different belief systems. I add that Buddhism really threw the religion departments all over America into a tizzy because it didn't have a God. In fact, it denied the existence of a God. And so what do you do then? Is it a religion? Is it philosophy? Is it literature? And of course, the answer is yes, because you study, Buddhism in all three departments, interestingly enough. And then another way of getting around the whole religion conundrum is to call it mythology. And so instantly it becomes, literature at the same time it's religion. And because you study it in literature in the English department, then you don't really think of it as a religion. It's just a mythology, which I always counted as not really religion. Uh, Episode 282, I talk about modernism, postmodernism, and post-postmodernism. And we are living in post-postmodernism, I believe. And that's where I go into this whole exercise of definition. That's where we have this is what created our problem that we're wrestling with now. So academicians who are subsidized by the government through student loans, they function as an arm of the state by providing the terms, the definitions that the state can then go on to use in all of their legislation, right? So, right. Anyway, so everything else is then for invalid and wrong, right? You get to say, oh no, that's wrong. That's what do you call it? Fake news, or that's what do you call that? Oh, for a while there was a crusade on trying to eradicate wrong thinking. But yeah, once you determine what the definition is, what the rule is, then everyone else is automatically wrong. You get to punish those people, you get to fire those people, right? You get to lay off those people, whatever. And yes, that's what happened to me. That's basically what life is all about. And I think what sped my demise was the fact that I kept pointing it out, much to everyone else's disappointment. But anyway, and we prove that it's wrong. We prove that the way that scholarship goes about doing things is wrong every time we use slang, right? Slang. What's slang? Well, you're taking words that have other meanings and you use it in a way that has nothing to do with or it only has the most tenuous relationship with the original use. And if you check out the Urban Dictionary, which is still alive and well, it's a lifesaver for me, especially teaching middle school. The slang changes almost weekly, and so I need to keep up with whatever it is that they're saying. Um, so you can see that uh, real language is constantly evolving and changing because people are alive, they're living. And so everything becomes organic, and rarely is anything ever set in stone. And so if left alone, if people left society alone, then consensus or agreement only happens over time, organically, and it's just temporary. I mean, think of some of the words that, I grew up with, which have totally different meanings now, like hookup, ballas, Hooters. I mean, these words, when I first learned them, and then how general society used them, it's just night and day. And to the point where I would use a word, to me, which was totally not a big deal, and other people just busting out laughing, or words that I thought were totally innocent or, had no negative connotation, all of a sudden becoming, uh, you know, extremely, extremely controversial. So words are constantly being adapted, changed, co-opted, whatever, just like social movements. So definitions create division, insider, outsider problem, the right and wrong issue, legal, illegal. Religion is the example that I used in episode 7, where based on the definition of your religion, it determines what you're going to look at, what counts, what doesn't count, what becomes the object of observation, and what is ignored. So imagine you're in a religion class and the teacher says, this is what religion is. If you have a very specific definition of religion, the more people you will have say, this has nothing to do with me. This is irrelevant to me. And especially these days where you're going to find more and more people, young people, who say that religion was never discussed in the household as they were growing up. Like religion was never a word that came up. They never subscribed to any religious organization. And so any conversation about religion has nothing to do with them. So how do you get them into the conversation? How do you get them to see that any discussion on religion has very much to do with them as well? You do it through definition. So if you want to uh, reject everything that I've said so far, well, it's likely you have no friends, right? You are a loner. You're just angry all the time, right? You just have people that you have to interact with, but no one who's really close to you, right? Because you're always right. And who wants to be around a person who's always right? More power to you. You can live your life like that if you want. But if you are an instructor or a manager or a boss or some kind of a parent even, or someone who wants friends, then you have to be able to take the perspective where you include more people, right? Where you encounter situations where diversity happens on a scale that you could never imagine before. Like I just said, people who were raised with no religion at all. So bad definition set up weird situations like having an understanding of religion, but then seeing it everywhere. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So a specific back in the 60s, people were very, very intent on establishing religion departments. See, the big split between church and state became more pronounced in the university, where in the university, if you studied religion, it was a theology department. And then there was a big split where now you had the creation of religion departments, and all theology was thrown into seminaries. They became separate institutions. So even the university where I was, they were the split in 1960. And so the theological portion of the school went north into a seminary, and in the university it became a religion department. So a lot of things changed. Now, that's everyone's happy. Okay, yay, we separated theology from the study of general religion. Okay. But then people started seeing problems. The definitions that they had set up became problematic. In other words, a lot of the characteristics that they ascribed to religion started appearing in society, but it's no official religion there at all. And so this guy, Robert Bella, in 1967, he wrote an article that discussed civil religion, right? And you got to realize that civil means not religious, right? This is just society. But he says, no, no, no. If you look in society, you'll see things that look like religion, but don't be mistaken, it's not religion. It only looks like religion. And so you have this weird thing like the Pledge of Allegiance, the Star Spangled Banner, national anthem. Then you have the holy sacred sites of the country, like the Statue of Liberty. Um, was it the Constitution? What is it? Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the Liberty Bell. These patriotic type things. Hey, people do pilgrimages to these places. People, venerate their saints, right? We'll call them war heroes, whatever. We'll put statues up for them. If you look at the Abraham Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., the inscription behind Lincoln says, "In this temple," right? So it's a temple to one of their gods, Abraham Lincoln. And so Robert Bella would look at all of this and said, okay, it's civil religion. So basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to account for the outliers that don't fit your conversation, that don't fit your definition. So, how do you account for that? And so he sort of did it by saying civil religion. So, it's not unlike saying socialism, democratic socialism, right? We're not the same. Well, yeah, you are. Okay. And so the way that I overcame this was just having a new definition, a better definition of religion. It's whatever it is that you believe. Right. And so if you believe something and that is dictating all the choices in life, well, then that's your religion. Um, and so that explains why a lot of people who may claim to be Christian have a lot of unchristian beliefs and behaviors because they only say they believe in Jesus, but in reality, in the core of their hearts, it's all about football. And I don't mean soccer, I mean NFL football. They plan their whole lives, they budget their lives around buying season tickets, which I hear are very, very expensive. Um, Even a regular game ticket is in the hundreds of dollars. So I imagine that season tickets are in the thousands. So you got to budget for that, right? So based on how good your definition is, you're basically excluding people from the conversation or you are including them. And if you exclude people from your conversation, but they have to participate, then you're going to require coercion. And already your argument is falling apart. So the result is if you have narrow definitions, bad definitions, definitions which exclude a lot of people and create a privileged class, well, now you're setting up hypocrisy through hypocritical laws, right? Because you're going to try to preserve your power. You're going to preserve your authority by codifying it through law, and that's hypocrisy. So the way that we pull back is we reset our definition. And when we change our definition, we begin to see things that we didn't see before, like religion. So once you say it's whatever you believe in, that becomes important in your decision-making process, then everything changes. American football becomes the national religion for at least a few months of the year. And so you begin to see that kind of phenomena. Why? And you'll see the same dynamics, violence, weeping, lots of emotions, preaching, saints, the priests, right? Referees or the NFL commission can be the priesthood, et cetera, et cetera. You can make these, uh, connections, which explains a lot of the social dynamics, which allows you to be able to see a lot of things that you didn't see before. That is what is possible through resetting perspective. And once you reset that perspective, then all of the hypocrisy becomes so visible, right? And then once you see the hypocrisy, then that's when you get to see why and where a lot of social problems come from. And I'm not just talking about American football. It's everything, right? What is labor? What is just? What is fair? What is fair competition? All of these terms, once you reset your definition, you begin to see a lot more especially the things that you never saw before. Like I would always toy with the idea in class, and people would say, "Oh, what about child exploitation?" And I was like, "Okay, well, child exploitation. What is the closest example, which is completely legal, totally socially acceptable, but no one ever thinks of it?" And it's the local public school. Everyone is forced to go, even if, especially if you live in a older city, a lot of the schools fail their students, but everyone is still forced to go. The school doesn't teach, but everyone must go. And they are fully funded, right? If you look at how much those school districts spend on each student, it's in the 20s and $30,000 per year per student. So where does all the money go, you see? And so you begin to see things that you never even considered before with this whole reset perspective. And this whole channel is about that. Here's a word people keep throwing around. What would be a reset definition of that word? What does it reveal? And so everyone should be allowed, I want to reemphasize, everyone's allowed their subjectivity. Comments like, you don't know what the words mean, it actually reveals narrow subjectivity. It reveals conservatism. It reveals hypocrisy, right? So that's what you're allowed that. You can do that if you want, but if you yourself realize it, then you see your own hypocrisy. And if you're a Christian, you should repent of that. But the opposite position, which this channel takes, is the position of the individual, right? So this channel is anti-socialist, anti-groupthink, anti-racialization. You see where I'm going with this, right? The primacy is the individual. The most important concept is the individual, because we as a society benefit from that. The more ideas, the more choices we have. The more choices we have, the higher the likelihood of finding something that actually works. So it's not that the desires of socialism are bad, right? I mean, what is it? Taking care of the poor, for example. Well, that's not a bad thing. It's just you can't achieve that goal through hypocrisy and coercion, which is what socialism is, right? You get someone's idea of helping the poor, but it actually doesn't help a lot of people. So if that's what you're comfortable, this sort of simplistic, authoritarian, closed-minded way of life is your thing, then yeah, okay, you can create your own private little habitat. I even say frequently that at home, I'm a fascist dictator, right? Like that's what being a parent is. You don't let your 5-year-old child determine what the dinner menu is or where the budget of where the money that you earn is going to go. You don't let your children decide, right? And so, on different situations, different levels, yeah, you're going to have to employ a bit of parental coercion, but that's permitted because you're responsible for your family. And so you get to make those decisions. The American government has decided that as soon as children turn 18, you no longer have authority over them, et cetera, et cetera. But you get the idea. So individual freedom achieves everything that socialists claim they want, but there's no one in control. Everyone, by making their own choices according to the way they see the world, they get to make their choices. And somehow, through this sort of grassroots organic activity of freedom, interaction freedom, you get those things that socialists claim that they want, right? You get some measure of equality. You get the poor taken care of. You get the eradication of poverty. You get all of those things. This and the civil rights movement in America in the 1960s, that's what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be, at least the way I always understood it to be. The goal was more freedom, but what we got was more legislation and discrimination. A lot of people have made the case, a very good case, that the civil rights movement and the Civil Rights Amendment just set up the opposite result, more discrimination. But, believe what you want. But the guideline is what is coercive, what is hypocritical. And once you discover that certain things are hypocritical or coercive, then you realize that those options are probably not that good. In fact, the results will be opposite of what you wanted, and you'll be worse off than you were before. And so that would be a way to distinguish or discriminate or make a distinction between better choices and worse choices. So, the whole point then, in conclusion, find something better. Use the reset perspective to see things you didn't see before, to see better choices that were invisible to you before. Make those choices, be happier, and then leave the rest of us alone. Okay, and that would be basically it. And I went a little bit long today, but hopefully you thought that it was worth it. And I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.